So I think I was asked to speak maybe in terms of new things happening in venture, in seed stage, new communities, maybe a little bit how venture is changing. And I have a pretty niche-y thing. I like to, as a 2X founder turned almost accidental investor myself, I like to do something fairly niche-y, which is to invest in sort of late seed, only B2B, only software as a service companies when they have a smidge of product market fit, but aren't really taken off. And ideally, they'll almost immediately go through rapid growth and accelerate. That's the goal. It doesn't work all the time, but we seem to have a bit of a program. And I wanted to sort of share my learnings and quirky investment criteria and what's come out of that. So quick of a background for the 90% of the room that doesn't know what this weird word SaaStr means. It's a community that I helped build that over the last 4 years has become the largest sort of web community for software as a service for B2B founders. We get about 3.5 million views a month on this content. It's across all different things. Quora with 25 million views works well. Medium with like 3,000 views doesn't work well. I know nothing about social media, but I have learned that if you kind of get it right and it's authentic, it can kind of work for you. So we got a lot of views per month. I started learning about the power of bringing communities physically together, so we did a few meetups. About 14 years ago, we had about 1,600 founders come to this thing called the SaaStr Annual for one day. We had amazing speakers come, and then this last February, we did it for 3 days. We had 5,000 founders from 47 countries, and this February, we'll have 10,000 founders come from all across the world, which is crazy, to really learn from their peers, which is what all this content's about. It's once you have 10 customers, 100 customers, how can we abstract away from product? It's the exact opposite of the conversation that Dave just had with Dave, which was all about product. I don't care about product so much. I care about if you have something good and product market fit, how can we make you grow faster? And the learning is, in B2B and SaaS, at a given price point, $5,000 a year, $20,000, $50,000, it's all the same. It really is all a playbook if you have a little bit of product market fit. So for me, I've really only institutionally investing for almost 3 years. I'm new to it. It's possible I barely know what I'm doing. But I've got a good group of early venture investments. As a group, they're at about 4x now, and a good group of angel and other investments before that about 10x. So at least I know this process sort of works. And from 500 startups, they include folks like TalkDesk, which is a centacorn, is that what we call it? I'll bet you even money it'll be on Dave's unicorn in the not too distant future. Algolia, which is a search as a service company from 500 that's done great, and a few others as well. And I'll show you in a second. Hold on. And here's like the quirky thing that I learned I like to do. And it turns out all B2B founders, SaaS founders like me, we all have one thing in common. Like, we're scared and we don't like to take product market fit anymore. And this is even as founders, even as a 2X founder, and I call myself a Magna Minus founder. I did 5X for my investors twice, not Summa, Magna Minus, but clearly I know how to build something. But I don't want to take I'll take all the other risk. I'll take risk the CEO hasn't moved here. I'll take management team risk. I have no idea how to close a lead risk. But the lead risk I don't want to take is no leads at all, because there's so many products out there. And why will anybody buy your boring call center as a service product or voice communication platform? I mean, we don't need another friggin' product in the business world. No one goes home at night on the business app store and searches for fun, cool apps. It just doesn't happen. So here's one of my companies, a QA as a service company, Rainforest QA, which is an example. But this is where I like to invest. They come out of an accelerator. They spend a year and a half and have zero revenue. Barely get up to about 100K of revenue at the start of 2015, and then in 14 months go to about 4 million in revenue. So I like that 100K to 4 million. Or put differently, what I've learned is the best of breed SaaS companies can go from 1 to 10 in 5 quarters or less. So it's great to invest in them when they're on that 1 to 10 million track, but you pay so much that I can't afford to invest out of a $70 million fund. So what I try to do is invest in this narrow window when they have leads but don't know how to close them. They don't have a management team, but they have something. And then the commitment I make is I try to help you put in your VP of sales, VP of marketing, the initial management team within 90 days. I try to help you learn how to go up market. And then I try to promote the heck out of you, not as well as 500 does. But if I can do a little bit, and I can kind of help promote you in a very authentic way, it turns out to be insanely helpful with recruiting. And then everyone wants to work with these companies. So add the team, try to double or triple pricing as quickly as possible, and a little bit of promotion is kind of the formula. But what's quirky is, a lot of people will tell you, when I say late seed, but a lot of these are second seed, and a lot of people will tell you that second seed is like the worst possible time to invest. Like, why didn't you get to Series A by then? What happened? You raised all this money at demo day. Why did you spend it all and only get to $8,000, $20,000 a month of revenue? It can be a quirky time to invest. But if you don't want to pay insane valuations and you want product market fit, it's kind of a weird animal you have to learn to invest in. So I learned to boil down my investment thesis really to three things. The first one will sound really nutty to the non-founders in this room. It'll sound really nutty to lifelong VCs, but every founder in the room will nod their head. So what I learned is, because SaaS is so hard and you have to recruit so many people, VPs of sales, marketing, product, engineering, customer success, if it's not a founder better than me, if it's not better than Magna Minus, there's no way you can build a unicorn. It's like impossible. It's too hard. Everyone quits after 5 years and 10 million in revenue or 8 million or 6 or 13. They do the impossible and they're too burnt out if they're not amazing. So if you're not a founder better than me, I quit. And it's adjusted for time. I have learned a few things, so I'm not expecting a 25-year-old founder to know everything that I do, but I am expecting that adjusted for time, they're better than me. If not, I just quit. The second one, and there's different ways to do this, I look early, and this is hard, I look early for the potential for superior unit economics. So, for example, we talked about Dave's investment in TalkDesk. When I invested in TalkDesk, at $1 million in revenue, which was late for me, the average price per seat was $15. We quickly marched that up to almost $100 for a lot of deals. So TalkDesk has done amazingly well, tens of millions in revenue now, growing at an epic rate. But imagine if that product was still $15 a month, right? Then this would be a mediocre company, even with an amazing CEO. So I'm looking for this at an outsized level. Algolia, another the search as a service company that Dave invested in. When I invested at about 100K in MRR, so in ARR, so maybe 8K a month. That's not much, and most of the customers were $99 a month, but they had 2 paying 5 figures. And so at least you could see a chance. And within 14 months, they'd close their first $1 million TCV deal. So I'm looking for an extra boost by going up market, because if you can drive your unit economics up, it just makes it easier to get from 1 to 10 in 5 quarters or less. It's the same amount of work to sell a product that's $15 a month as $45 a month, but you literally get twice as much revenue. So I'm looking for this. And then the last thing, if you want to talk about niches in venture, I want to lean in heavily now. I do not believe I believe in a concentrated strategy. I believe in doing I want to do 1.5 investments a quarter, which is a lot for a VC, but it's not a lot for something like 500 startups. But top 10 mistake was not buying every share in every company I ever could. So, but to lean in as much as I can, I need to believe that someone else can mark this thing up in 12 months or less. I need to believe it. So I'm willing to invest in companies when I invest that are profoundly boring. Software testing as a service, call center as a service, search as a service, legal e-discovery as a service, auto fleet management as a service. But I have to believe that when they hit a couple million in revenue, growing 10 or 15% a month with a charismatic CEO, that someone's going to write an 8-figure check at a much higher valuation. Otherwise, I have to quit, or I'm going to get crushed, or there's going to be other issues. So, but I don't mind if they're completely boring when I invest. That's the way it sort of works. And so how do you see these companies break out before they do? And let me just touch on a few things that I talked about before. The art of this 1 or 2 bigger customers, like we talked about with Algolia from 500 Startups or others, is if in your first 100 customers or 20 or 15 or whatever, if you get to 100 and 0 of them are larger customers, you'll never get a larger customer. 100 is 1,000 is 10,000. You establish an organic pattern. But if you have 10 or 20 or 30 or any customers and 1 or 2 are bigger, there's an interesting question. Is it the future or is it an anomaly? And I think a lot of folks that haven't been founders or don't specialize get really worried it's an anomaly. Like, I have this one crazy, like, oh, okay, well, you closed this company, but that was Twilio, and they were in 500 startups, and it was a favor. Okay, maybe. But let's roll that back. If you didn't know the company and they came in from the ether on the internet and you still somehow got one customer to pay you $10,000 a year, even though the others pay you $100, then I talk to the customer. How did you find them? And then I ask them my one Columbo question. You pay $10,000 a year for Algolia or TalkDesk. Would you pay twice as much? And usually they'll say something like, don't tell Tiago, but yes, I would pay twice as much. Then I know that one or two are 10 or 20 and are 100 or 200. I know that with no marketing, no understanding how to do sales and marketing whatsoever, if you got one or two folks to pay you an outsized amount of revenue with a little bit of help, for a company with no brand that no one's heard of, we can get to 10 or 20 and 100. So I want to see if those first couple bigger customers are anomalies or the future, and a little bit of discussion pretty much turns that out pretty quickly. And then I look for something funky, which is I look at companies that are terrible at closing deals. Terrible at closing deals. And I learned this from my first real VP of sales. I had a first one that didn't work out. That was a disaster where I lost all the Series A money building up his terrible sales team. And then in like 2009 or something, when the world had ended, I hired my first real VP of sales, who'd been the first head of sales at LinkedIn. And I sat down with Brendan and I said, good news is I love you and I'll back you to the end of the world. Bad news is if you don't double revenue in 60 days, we're bankrupt. And he looks at me and he said, well, I've done these 4 startups, including LinkedIn. You have more leads than any of them. And he says, no problem, I'll double revenue in 60 days. And he did. He did. So the hardest part, again, of this SaaS stuff is finding leads. And if you have leads and you don't know how to close them, I can bring you your Brendan. I can bring you a VP of sales. I can bring you a VP of demand gen to help you even get more of these. But if no one's even driving by and stopping, I can't solve that problem. So I don't mind at all if you're closing 1 deal out of 50. I can help you. It's pretty easy if you bring in a great team to go from 1 out of 50 to 3 out of 50. But if it's 0, I quit. So if there's good leads, I get super excited. Another thing that I get excited about, and this makes some investors nervous, is if outbound's working early. Because think about this. Who the heck is going to pick up a phone or a LinkedIn for yet another product? So if someone in the early days has really nailed an outbound engine, that means you have a really high connect rate. And that means as you add more talent to the sales team, usually you can get to 10 million pretty expeditiously. So most first-time founders have no idea how to do outbound. They know how to hustle, but they don't know how to build this engine. So if you see it early, there's something special. And then just one last thing, and then I'll talk a little bit about other points. The other thing that I love to see early in this pre-seed stage is if you have any startups that are outside of tech, right? Any folks that are outside of tech. Because if you do have that, then it's the future, right? Any folks that are mid-market or otherwise. And then lastly, and then let me talk about what isn't enough. Then the key, and I know this sounds obvious, but is the CEO committed to sales? And we see this particularly in developer-centric companies. I love developer-centric companies, but if the CEO isn't committed to sales as the first time, they'll never drive this thing up market. So that's the key. CEO better than me, potential for outsized unit economics, and then something that at least by the next round can be hot is the formula. And then just lastly, in the last couple minutes, things that I've learned that are sucker bets that don't work at this stage. Number one, feels sales is too expensive. This is a sucker bet. The business just gets going, and you're like, oh my God, I have to pay a VP of sales more than I make. Never works. Like, that's just never, ever, ever going to work. Maybe you'll get through it later, but we're just going to flush all of our money down the drain. You have to be comfortable that the sales team's going to make more money than you, and that ideally, your VP of sales will be making more money than you within 60 or 90 days. And when founders see that, they're not going for it. Second one I learned in B2B, all their numbers are terrible and wrong. Their financials are awful. They're startups. But if they're really, really wrong, something's wrong in this business. I don't mind if they don't understand exactly how to calculate gross margins. But if the gross margins are 100% and they don't understand anything, that's a warning sign that they're not really committed to this business. Third one, controversial, and just 2 others. I know people don't like this. I'm not sure I care if the CEO moves to the Bay Area, but if it's a sales-driven company and they won't, that's a problem. That means they're not truly committed to going there. So I don't really care if they come, other than that I can't help them. But I get really worried when they're not going for it in software as a service, because the sales talent, there's so much more in the Bay Area. And then just 2 last ones that I've learned. This one we talked about earlier, but this is the one. If the CEO's tired, don't ever in SaaS invest in a CEO that's tired, because 1 to 10 is the hardest phase. There aren't enough resources. The customers start to complain. The feature gaps get more and more acute. It's the hardest time of all from 1 to 10. Just when the business gets good at a top-line perspective, you can't afford to have enough people in the business. And if the CEO gets tired from 1 to 10, they will quit on you, and they'll never create a unicorn. And the last one, which is obvious in SaaS, but it's cross-functional. You have to build a team. So if you wouldn't work for them, don't do that investment. I made one investment I don't like out of the 23. The company's doing $15 million now. It's not terrible. I wouldn't work for them. They got tired. They quit. They didn't go up market. It's not a formula that works. And so that's sort of the magic of finding it. Are there leads? Will they go up market? Are they committed to sales? And I think if you do that and you can bring them the talent, you can get from 1 to 10 in 5 quarters or less. So those are my learnings. Thank you very much.